Let there be light.
I decided to go on a first-person view for this particular video just because a lot of what I was doing, it was difficult to film, and I wanted to get you into the action as much as I could, just so you could truly see exactly what all needs to be done. In this case, I'm just working on untying everything from the engine from where we actually drop the powertrain out. Once everything's been untied, we can start working on assorted electrical connectors. My primary goal starting off is to get this intake manifold off and allow me access to the rear valve cover. So I'm just working on things such as this, the throttle body electrical connector, and other things around the intake manifold. There's a support brace underneath the throttle body on the intake manifold that braces it to the cylinder head. So make sure you try and make sure you remove that before you start prying on the intake to get it off. Should be the last thing here, just the suction side PCV hose. A little bit of persuasion from a pry bar, and she's free and ready to come off. Now that the intake manifold is out of the way, I'm just going to start working on getting the electrical connectors off of the valve covers. Both valve covers obviously need to come off in order to do this repair, and there's a lot of electrical harnesses that are routed over top of them. Not only for the ignition coils and fuel injectors, but also for things such as the variable valve timing solenoid and other miscellaneous electrical items. So what I'm currently working on is just getting all of that disconnected so I can easily get the valve cover out. Once you've disconnected all the electrical connectors from the valve cover, just fold the harness back out of the way. Whenever you remove an intake manifold from a vehicle, you're basically creating a hazardous situation in that any small bolt or anything like that can easily go into the intake runners and potentially into the combustion chamber. In an effort to prevent that, I'm just going to stuff the intake runners with shop towels. That way if anything does fall in them, it won't go into the actual cylinder. Now starting on the rear valve cover, basically doing the same thing that we did for the front. We just need to get all of these harnesses out of the way so we can actually get the cover off. And again, once everything is disconnected, simply fold this harness back out of the way. Next up, I'm removing all 6 ignition coils. And again, I'm placing the fasteners for those ignition coils back in the valve cover just for safekeeping. Since we're about to have this engine completely open, it's a good practice to either vacuum or blow off basically anywhere around the top side of the engine before you actually expose anything. All of that dirt and stuff like that, you know, especially on an engine as complex as this one, is not going to do it any favors. I'm going to start working on unbolting the valve covers now. You're going to notice that I'm not actually going to remove the valve covers at this time. I'm going to keep them on until we're ready to get the timing cover off, simply as a preventative measure for getting anything in the engine. Now the valve covers have been unbolted, we can start working on the front side of the engine, getting the timing cover accessible. Simply starting off here by removing the accessory belt. Now that the accessory belt's out of the way, we can start working on getting the harmonic balancer off. 18mm bolt, very, very tight. You're best off using an impact here. Now you can use pretty much any old puller to get this balancer off. In this case, I'm actually using a GM Chrysler puller. Not for any particular reason other than I'm fond of this puller. It works well 90% of the time, so I just grab this one. Now when you're using a puller of this design, there's insert rods that you need to use along with it, because as you drive this puller in, it's actually going to push against the rod, not the physical crankshaft itself. So just figure out whichever rod is the correct length for your application and then use that one. With the balancer out of the way, this timing cover is pretty much free game at this point. So I'm just starting to work on removing all 26 of the timing cover fasteners. You'll notice some of these studs here for the engine mount, they're a little tough to work around. Eventually what I ended up doing was actually removing one of them to get better access to one of the bolts. You may feel inclined to do the same thing. You'll notice as I'm pulling these fasteners out, I'm just kind of taking a look at them just to see if there's any length differences. What I can tell you is that all of the 10mm bolts on the outside perimeter of this engine, they're all the same size, so no need to worry about mixing up lengths or anything like that. The fasteners here in the middle, sort of near the intake valley, they're also all the same size. There's 4 bolts in the middle of the timing cover, 3 large ones that go where the motor mount goes, and then there's one very, very small, I believe it's an M8 bolt, sort of above and to the left of those 3 I just removed. Now that everything's been unbolted, we can start working on getting these valve covers off of here. In my case, they were extremely stuck on. They did not want to come off. Honestly, I thought I was going to break them, but luckily I got them off without doing so. Just take your time, be gentle, kind of work all sides of the situation, and you should be fine getting these off. With both valve covers removed, we can go to one of the pry tabs on the timing cover and we can just pry that off. I believe there's a total of 5 different pry locations. They actually have tabs that hang off and allow you to get a pry bar underneath them. Now that I have access to the chains, I'm simply rotating this engine around. I'm trying to get it near top dead center number 1 to allow for the installation of my timing tools. You are going to need specialized timing tools in order to perform this repair. And in order to install the timing tools, you're going to need to remove these oil passages. There are 3-bolt oil rails. There's one on each cylinder head. Where the tool is going to install, it's going to install basically right over top of where this thing is, so removal of them is required.
If you service a lot of Fords, this kit right here is a great one to get. It has just about all of the Ford timing tools. The ones we're going to be using are these right here. 567, 618. What you're looking for is on the primary phaser for the intake camshaft. See that dot there? You want that dot at the 12 o'clock. See the same thing over here. There's a dot on the crankshaft. You want that down here at the 5 o'clock. And if you look on the camshafts, you'll notice some flats. That's where these timing tools are going to be installed. I have it pretty close to lined up. We're right in there now. So we're going to install this timing tool on both banks of the engine. Make sure it's flush with the mating surface, top of the cylinder head where the valve cover bolts onto. What that's going to do, it's going to keep these camshafts from rotating, so we can pull the primary chain off, no issues. Now, if you're reusing the chain, what you want to do is you want to make some marks on here. Because when you go back together with this, the chains are marked. You can see a link here, colored link here. That would be for the crankshaft. There should be some other colored links on here, but they probably worn off over time. So what we're going to need to do is make our own marks. Paint marker generally tends to work pretty good. So this is how I do it. I mark the link directly above the dot on the camshaft on both sides. And then I mark both links that are centered on the crankshaft dot. So just like that. At this point we know where everything is. We can go ahead and pull this thing off of here. So I'm going to start with the guide. You can really start any way you want. Some people start with the tensioner. To be honest, it just doesn't really matter here. So I'm going to pull this guide off first. With the primary tensioner off, we can simply slip this guide off, just like that. And then we can basically unwind this chain from this point here. Be careful not to disturb your paint marks, otherwise, you know, not gonna be fun retiming this thing. I mean, I suppose you can count links if you know the link counts. I gotta tell you, I don't know the link counts.
So I was having some issues actually removing the primary chain, so I decided that I wanted to remove the variable valve timing solenoids to allow the chain to have more room to flex and get around the camshaft phasers.
There we go.
You can see with the solenoids removed, chain comes off a lot easier.
So avoiding my marks. Set the chain safely right there. Now what we need to do is break these phasers loose to get ye old water pump up out of the way. T55 is a little loosey-goosey in there. That's what it is. See if my cam tool is going to hold it. Yep, it held it. There's one. That's tight.
Now you'll notice before actually removing these phasers, you're going to need to collapse the secondary chain tensioners. The best way that I know to do that is to simply use your thumbs and apply firm downward pressure, as you can see here, and then use the provided locking tool that is included in the OTC kit. And basically all that's going to do is it's just going to hold that tensioner down in its collapsed position so you can slip the phasers out over the tensioner guides with no issue. With the phasers out of the way, we can now remove the other primary chain guides, and that's going to allow us to actually fully remove the water pump.
There's number 2. We're going to break this loose. A lot of coolant's going to go in the engine block. That's okay, because this engine's not going to be ran until I drain all of it out. So currently I'm fine with that. Though it is making a little bit more of a mess than I thought it would. Easy as that. Gasket's completely flat.